Excuse me, Your Worship, you're live.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. All right, Council, it's 5 p.m. I will call our Council meeting for Monday, September 20, 2021, Election Day, to order. And I'll start by reading our land acknowledgement. For more than 15,000 years, the First Nations walked upon and cared for the lands we now call home. Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe, and many others who cared for their families and communities the way we now seek to care for ours. The town of Collingwood acknowledges the Lake Simcoe Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818 and respects all of the nation-to-nation agreements we have formed relationships with the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. The reality of our shared history, the current contributions of Indigenous people within our community, and seeks to continue empowering expressions of pride amongst all of the diverse stakeholders in this area. We seek to do better, to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and community, nation to nation. Now we'll look for a motion to adopt the agenda. And the motion reads that the content of the council agenda for September 2021 be adopted as as amended. And there is a deletion, and it is item 15.1. We are removing the in-camera session for tonight. So can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Deputy Mayor and Councillor Berman. Unless there's any questions or comments, I'm going to call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Declarations of pecuniary interest in the general nature and thereof. Are there any declarations tonight? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you. I have a declaration to make. It's specific to PRC 2021-07. And that would be item supporting an inclusive change. My son is a registered participant with Collingwood Minor Hockey Association, and therefore that gives me the privilege of being the paying member. And so therefore I'll remove myself with regards to the conversation. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So what we'll do is we'll sever that item out of them initially so you can vote to the majority of them, and then we'll ask you to leave for that particular item. Are there any other declarations tonight, Council? Seeing none, if you find yourself in that situation as we progress, please let us know in the general nature of the conflict. Item 4, adoption of the minutes. The resolution reads that the minutes of the council meeting held July 26, 2021 be approved as presented. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Berman, Councillor Jeffrey. Any errors or omissions, Council? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And is there any business arising from the previous minutes? Seeing none, then we will move on to community announcements. And I'll start with you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I have several that I would like to make this evening. The first, and I think that I speak for everyone, and I'm sure that you'll have more to say about this, but I certainly would like to send my heartfelt condolences and my thoughts to all of those who were affected by the fire in the apartment complex on 10th Street last evening. And I'll leave it at that. This last weekend in particular, there felt, particularly within the community for those who participated, I happened to be there, and I certainly would agree with the overwhelming positive comments. But over the weekend, we had the Cottage Cup taking place in the Eddie Bush Arena, hosted by our Collingwood Blues Junior A hockey team. Saturday afternoon, going into the evening, we had the Art Crawl. And the Art Crawl is an event that's put together by a number of different participants, and I think it was excellent. 2 years ago, the event was spectacular, and the attendance was overwhelming. With the modified format, it was still well attended, and those who attended, I think, did so in a respectful and responsible manner, and I think that people had a great time. With that, I'd like to just sort of segue into the fact that those who attended, or perhaps have seen since, there is a public art installation taking place right now. It's on the south wall of the North Winds building. And this is a project that is invested, it's about $10,000 was the investment that the BIA put into this. It's a partnership with the approval and cooperation. We extend our thanks to the owners of the building, who include Steve and his son, Chris Asoff, as well as the tenants of the building. And if you have a chance, check it out. Blaze Works is the handle of the artist, and you can find him on Instagram. And I encourage it. It's a fun, reflective mural of summer activity. And as you walk the mural from west to east, you'll notice that it runs into a blank canvas, and that blank canvas potentially could be for a future art installation. The BIA over the fall has continued to move forward with a couple of improvements to the downtown, and that is certainly one of them. Others may have witnessed or seen firsthand the first utility box that was wrapped with the artwork of Andrew Payhaw, the local artist, Andrew Payhaw. This is the first in what we hope will be a series utilizing the utility boxes that are owned by EPCOR. So it's a collaborative project between local artists, the BIA, who is spearheading this, and the cooperation of EPCOR. So it's nice to see a new art installation, and then installations that are reflective of local artists taking place within their community. And that leads into my last comment as it relates to art, and that is that we are moving forward with the archway. It'll be a permanent installation at the corner of Huron, Ontario and Highway 26, or First Street locally. It will be a gateway entry to the downtown, and it will be both art, but it will also be signage in the sense that it will reflect the entrance to our community or to our downtown specifically. And then the last note I just would like to make as it relates specifically to the BIA, and that is that September the 27th to October the 1st, it's Monday through Friday. It is our first fashion week. And I would encourage those who are interested in supporting our local merchants, designers, those who appreciate fashion and the arts, to check out collingwoodfashionweek.com, or you can find them by simply Googling it and find them on Instagram, et cetera, or I should say Facebook. And then the last item I would just very quickly like to mention, and perhaps others would like to comment, and then we'll probably pull from the consent agenda, and that is that Wednesday is Car-Free Day worldwide. But it's great to see that we will have an event taking place here locally. The BIA is supportive of this particular event downtown, but it's taking it's community wide, not just the BIA. And I just want to applaud those who are spearheading this particular initiative. I think that it's welcoming to be in a community that is open and receptive to new ideas, whether it be something like the Maple Street bike project or World Car-Free Day, and pros and cons. And it's great to be supportive of these environmental initiatives, and I hope that people will check it out. And those are my announcements tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. You certainly covered a lot of ground, but it was wonderful to see our downtown so activated this weekend with the Cottage Cup and the art crawl, and to see that mural come to life over the space of the weekend. So quite fantastic. And we will certainly be talking more, I think, about Car-Free Day and the fact that Town Hall will be illuminated in green on Wednesday night. Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. Just one item from me tonight, and that is that as a reminder to the 600 or so people who are members of the Collingwood Curling Club, that curling is back. It was very nice to see the art and the hockey and all of the things, and it looks as though we're starting to maybe see the other side of COVID-19. And so registration for new members is on Friday, and registration for returning members is on Thursday, starting at 7. Be up early because you want the draw that you want.
And very exciting to see that one of our own local homegrown curlers will be going off to the Briar in Nova Scotia to potentially qualify for the upcoming Olympics. So that's very exciting.
Yes, very, for Cassandra, yeah.
Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is our first council meeting since back to school began at the start of the month. So it's a nice opportunity to thank all our teachers and administrators, bus drivers, and of course our students, and to thank everyone from our police services board right through to bylaw and OPP and town staff who've done so much, touching on the deputy mayor when it comes to traffic calming and promoting active transportation. So just a reminder to our drivers, we have over 1,000 students moving every day actively. Wouldn't it be tremendous to see that number continue to grow? So a big thank you also, of course, to our crossing guards. So welcome back to school, everybody. We sure hope it stays that way. And a big thank you to everyone involved.
Thank you. Councillor Madigan.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson, and welcome back to everybody. I hope you had a nice month, somewhat off. My community announcement tonight is about a member of our community. His name is Rory Kramer, and it was brought to my attention that this fellow walks every day, and 2 to 3 times a week he picks up a bag of garbage every day off the trails. So he's just one person out there that's probably there's many doing it. And I just wanted to say thank you to him on behalf of Marion Smiling. She's an avid trail walker, so she knows how hard it is. And no complaints from Rory. He just wants to make our town even more beautiful than it already is. So thank you very much, Rory, for everything you do.
Thank you. And judging from our trails, Rory's making a big impact. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And just following up on the activities that our tireless Collingwood Climate Action Team have recently become involved in addition to Car Free Day, they have just kicked off their very ambitious Community Carbon Footprint Challenge that will obtain a baseline measurement of carbon output within the town and local residents, and will also track progress of hopefully reduction in carbon emissions in residential as participants become more cognizant of how they are using energy and consuming food and other products that create carbon emissions. Anyone who is interested in participating can get more information and sign up by going to the collingwoodclimateaction.com website. And that's it for me, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. And I think we had David Orling come and talk to us about that. And I think I volunteered all of council to participate in this. And I think you, Councillor Doherty, are going to be head cheerleader for that. So we look forward to doing that and figuring out our baseline footprint so that we can move forward to streamline that. Councillor Berman.
Nothing for me, Mayor Saunderson. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I have a very exciting announcement for us this afternoon. About mid-afternoon, I heard from OPP Superintendent Smith with an announcement from OPP Commissioner Carrick. And on behalf of the Commissioner's Command team, I am pleased to announce the following appointment. Inspector Loris Lutcherson has been appointed as our new detachment commander in Collingwood and the town of Blue Mountains. And a bit of background information here for Inspector Lutcherson. Formerly Indigenous Policing Bureau, becomes commander effective immediately. Inspector Lutcherson started his career with the OPP in 1999 at the Loyalist Detachment. He has worked at the Sioux Lookout Detachment and the Huronia West Detachment, where he served as a shift sergeant and operations manager. He then went on to work as the executive officer to the Deputy Commissioner of Field Operations, followed by the Provincial Operations Center and Indigenous Policing Bureau, where he served as the Director of Community Initiatives. And as the Acting Bureau Commander, Loris is a designated Critical Incident Commander, has a Bachelor of Arts honors degree in history from Queen's University, and is a graduate of the Rotman School of Management Police Leadership Program. He is also a recipient of the Police Exemplary Service Medal, 20 years. And the quote from the command was, "Loris is one of the most honest and compassionate members of the OPP. He truly leads by example, demonstrating the leadership values of our organization." So we welcome Inspector Litcherson as detachment commander, and on behalf of the board, we very much look forward to working on our action plan and strategic goals and making our community a safer place. Thank you.
Thank you for that announcement, Councillor Jeffrey, and that's very exciting news. Loris has been our acting detachment commander for a while, so it's great to have him confirmed, and he will be a wonderful addition. Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you. Just briefly to add on to Deputy Mayor Hull's comment about the new walking art gallery that the painting of the utility boxes will create, is that the BIA is looking for expressions of interest from artists who might want to apply their talents to this great project. So they should reach out to Sue Nicholson if they're so interested. And secondly, I just wanted to say, as everyone knows, today's the federal election, and if anyone listening hasn't voted yet, the polls are open until 9:30, and I voted at the Central Park Arena. And I wanted to say it was so well run. Everything was spaced nicely. There was no lineups, and I just encourage everyone to exercise their democratic duty today. Thank you.
Well said. And it was a busy 24 hours at the Central Park Arena as it played housing for some of our residents that were displaced by the fire last night. As the Deputy Mayor referred to, we had a fire at 10th and Spruce Street, an apartment building there. Approximately 52 residents are out of their homes. And so there was a great flurry of activity, and thank you to our fire department for their quick service, to our Parks and Rec department for opening the rink at 2 a.m, and to our volunteers at the Red Cross Emergency Services who were out by 6 a.m. helping to house some of those who were displaced. So certainly we are all thinking about those individuals, and we hope that they have a safe transition as we look at the damage to the building. With that, we'll move on then to deputations, and item 6.1 is the Pretty River Dike maintenance. And I know we have a number of representatives from the NVCA. I've got Mark Hartley as the senior engineer responsible for the project who will be doing the deputation. But if there are others that will be speaking, just let me know. I'll make sure that I introduce you and your role.
Thank you.
All right, Mark, I see you are ready to go. So certainly we are all thinking. So I will pass the floor to you. Mark, you have 10 minutes. As we look at the damage to the
Thank you. There's a slide presentation, I think, coming up. So while I'm waiting for that to be loaded, good evening, Your Worship, members of council. Before I start, I'd like to share with you, if I may, just a very quick introduction. I started my career as a fisheries biologist, and then returned to university to obtain degrees in water resources engineering and river hydraulics. Since then, I've spent my entire career as a professional engineer, spanning over 25 years in both the private and public sectors, integrating nature-based processes into engineering solutions with a particular emphasis on flood and erosion projects. So tonight, I'd like to take a few minutes to present to you information about the NVCA's Pretty River Dike Maintenance Project. Next slide, please. So as you know, it's a number of water courses passing through the town, and all of them are subject to flooding in one way, shape, or form or another. And here's a couple of photographs that made available by the museum for flooding in downtown Collingwood back in 1912, as well as one on Hume Street in 1942. Next slide, please. Interestingly enough, there's another news clip that specifically makes reference to the Pretty River, and I thought the quote was rather interesting when it said that the Pretty River burst loose for a Saturday night in the town. And it goes on to say that the peak of the flood, Collingwood was flooded with up to 2 feet of water. And so interestingly enough, next slide, please, only about sort of 10 years later or so was when the sort of the planning for One of these solutions was started, and that was the Pretty River Dike. And so next slide, please. I'll just sort of indicate that the graphic in the top right corner. So what actually a dike is that it's essentially two sort of earthworks, two berms built on either side of the river. You can see in the arrows in the top right graphic, such that when a flood event comes, illustrated by that blue plane at the very, very top of the dike, those floodwaters are contained within that corridor, and that the lands on the either side of the dike remain dry. So that's the intention of how a dike system works. And so in the bottom graphic, or at the bottom of the slide, is a picture, an aerial shot of the Pretty River Dike in the vicinity of the Pretty River Parkway, showing its construction, showing what it looked like just after construction in the mid-70s. And what you can see in particular is that on the banks, you can see the white, looks like a bit of a moonscape. Essentially, that is stone riprap to protect the bank of the dike, whereas the bed of the system is still, in this particular case, bedrock. So that's what it looked like just after it was built. Next slide, please. So what's happened over the years is that the slope of the dike has sort of been, vegetation has taken hold and grown. And as you can see in the photograph on the bottom, a number of these trees have grown to a sort of decent size. And so what's happening is that vegetation, shrubs and trees and what have you, hold back the floodwaters, if you will, and sort of reduce the capacity of the dike system to convey the flood event. So you can see on the graphic on the right, in particular, that's something called section 5, where the purple arrow is one location right now where it's shown in our flood mapping that the dike sort of spills over, or the floodwaters spill over the dike and sort of work their way into the downtown of Collingwood. So that's something that we would like to avoid or trying to prevent if we can. So next slide, please. So what we're proposing to do in this dike maintenance project is that we need to sort of try to remove as a select amount of that vegetation as we can to allow the floodwaters to pass through that corridor. So the dike has been divided into 6 sections. Sections 1, 2, and 3 are downstream of the Pretty River Parkway. Section 4 goes from the Pretty River Parkway to Hume Street. And then section 5 from Hume Street to the Siding Trail Bridge. And then section 6 from the Siding Trail Bridge to the sort of private driveway crossing that sort of essentially serves 452 Raglan. So those are the 6 sections of the dike in its entirety. And we're proposing to start work on sections 4 and 5 this fall. And with the idea that in phase 1, we'd be removing a lot of the small woody material that's on the banks of the dam. So that's the shrubs and some of the ground cover on the slope of the dike, while sort of taking care to preserve as much as we can of the material right up against the water's edge. We'd be doing this work essentially between August and March. So we're trying to avoid or trying to be respectful for the bird season. Clean equipment protocols will be used so that we are being cognizant of invasive species and protecting the river itself. We're going to be sort of dividing the work zones into short sections as much as possible so we can avoid impact to the trail. And we'd like to get this section, sort of sections 4 and 5 of this phase 1 work completed by the fall of this year. So when it comes to phase 2 was then sort of starting into 2022 would be then assessing the trees that have remained standing, those larger trees, and trying to identify the numbers, the species, the size of those trees, and come up with a plan to determine which of those trees do need to be removed. So next slide, please. So with that in mind, we're sort of doing our best to sort of give consideration for the fish and wildlife habitat. It's important to the NVCA, and I know the town as well, to find a balance between community safety, water quality, and habitat protection. So as an example, on the photograph on the top right, is just some trying to illustrate some what it looks like in terms of some of this low grassy, the lower material, the grasses, the wildflowers, what have you. And we recognize that that sort of a vegetation community is important for pollinators and foraging birds. Whereas the photograph on the bottom left of this slide is sort of illustrating how close some of the shrubs have gotten to the water's edge. And that's also important for fish and wildlife habitat. So next slide, please. So just imagine, if you would, and I know it's sort of hard to wrap your head around this, but that the water level, if it rose to that height that's illustrated by the white line in both of these photographs, imagine the water level under flood conditions at about that elevation. And you can see then that the number of trees and amount of vegetation that essentially would be underwater. And that's trying to illustrate sort of how this dike is going to be holding back those floodwaters and essentially contributing to it spilling over the dike. So that's what we are trying to look towards, to try to find that balance between fish wildlife habitat as well as conveying floodwaters through the town. Next slide, please. So how we sort of moved forward with this is developed a communication plan to try to communicate this message to the community, the town, the residents, and what have you, and stakeholder groups as to sort of why we're doing it, how we're doing it, and open up the floor for any questions that they may have. So we started back in August 13th with a sort of an on-site tour with a couple of counselors, just to sort of walk them along the sections of the dike. Trying to communicate what it looks like and some of the examples of what would be removed and what would stay. We had a stakeholder meeting, online stakeholder meeting on September 8th. That included groups like Pollinate Collingwood, Collingwood Climate Action Team, members from the Blue Mountains Watershed Trust and from the Trails Committee. So we had a meeting to just present the same material to them to get their feedback. And then we're sort of having this presentation. We prepared an information package for council that's been distributed. We're planning to do a media release tomorrow. We've been Collingwood's been very helpful and gracious to offer the Engage Collingwood page to help us communicate the message as to what's happening and keep them up to date with what's happening through the project on that page. We're planning to send out a mailing to all the Collingwood residents, both a letter and a brochure on September 24th. And then we're also planning an online public question and answer session, just open up to the public as to any questions they have and concerns. We'll try to address them as best we can at that time. And then there'll be updating or ongoing social media posts throughout the rest of the project. And we're also looking to, there's some signage along the trail right now, the river trail that goes along the top of the Pretty River Dike. It's to communicate some important pieces of information and some historical pieces of information to the town and the trail users. And we're proposing to use a similar signage to convey some information about the Pretty River Dike, the corridor, and its need as a flood conveyance strategy or flood conveyance system. So next slide, please. So here's an example of the brochure. So not intended for you to read it, at least not in this graphic, but it just gives you an idea as to what the brochure is going to look like. It'll be folded, put into an envelope, and then obviously with the letter in the bottom right corner. So with both the town and NVCA logo on that. So it shows you what that brochure is going to, and letter is going to look like. Next slide, please. So with that, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present this information about what we're up to with the Pretty River Dike Maintenance Project, and open the floor back to you, Your Worship, for any questions.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you to all of the members of the NVCA that joined us tonight for this information. Councillor, are there any questions or comments on the presentation? I see Councillor Doherty and then Councillor Hamlin. Go ahead, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you to Mr. Hartley, thank you for that presentation. One question I have is why this section, the Pretty River Dike, has been selected as opposed to sections 1, 2, and 3, which are north of the Pretty River Parkway and which are known to flood quite regularly. Whereas I'm, at least in my memory, I do not recall any serious flooding activity in the sections in which you will be working in the coming months.
Mark?
Thank you, through your worship. Very, good point, and thank you for sharing your recollections of flooding through that section. Yes, sections 2 and 3 downstream of Pretty River Parkway are important. They need to be maintained as well. Where we plan to be starting on sections 4 and 5, mainly because there's easy access in terms of be able to work off the stone dust trail that's there right now to get access to the slope of the dike and to be able to remove the material. We plan to go in there with some small, essentially landscaping equipment, a small quad machine with a trailer, a small excavator to help us drag the vegetation up the slope and off site. So it's mainly starting in sections 4 and 5 because it is easy access. The entire section needs to be done. A report that was recently done for town staff for their stormwater master plan also recommended getting work into section 6 as well. So the reason why it's sort of, you might not recall seeing flooding in those sections sort of upstream Pretty River Parkway is essentially because it's where that vegetation, that's kind of where almost the action is occurring, if you will, in terms of where the water is backing up, and that you're actually seeing the results of that downstream of Pretty River Parkway. So, and that's of course where all the ice jams occurring, where the town is spending some funds to be able to remove those ice jams and what have you. So that needs to be done as well, but the emphasis needs to be placed on clearing out sections 4, 5, and 6.
Any follow-up, Councillor?
No, thank you. That was my question.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a follow-up for Councillor Doherty's question, and then I have one of my own. And thank you very much I was one of the councillors who went on the tour, so I appreciated that opportunity, and thank you for your remarks today. In the area of the Pretty River that is north of Pretty River Parkway, if the project goes ahead as you're planning and the vegetation's all removed, I had understood the water would flow a lot faster and spit out, if I can put it that way, into the Oliver Crescent area. Is that going to happen? Like, what will be the impact of, in that area? I'm actually quite worried about that.
Mark?
Thank you, through your worship. Excellent question. It's not so much the speed of the water that's maybe the one sort of thing to focus on or to think about. It's more of sort of the volume of water that we need to convey through this corridor. I think that's sort of the important part to think about. So it's, the water is, it's just the flood waters through our modeling and the flood levels that are going to occur for the regulatory event, or we anticipate will happen for the regulatory event, will rise up to almost the top of the dike. And it's a slow process. It's not so much the speed, but all sections sort of 1, 2, and 3 downstream of the parkway, as well as from upstream of the parkway, 4, 5, and 6, they all sort of need to operate as a contiguous unit. And so it's the idea is that certainly once this vegetation is removed, it's just the nature of the Pretty River. It's fully expected that there still may be some ice jams. That's kind of why the weir is there in the first place, downstream of the parkway, to try to help with that situation. So it's not so much the speed, it's just trying to get that volume through during that particularly that regulatory flood event. And so they're all, that's why we need to get in there all through the sections and sort of give it the maintenance it needs to make sure that it functions as a flood conveyance infrastructure.
Thanks, Mark. Councillor Hammond, your question?
Yeah, thank you. I understand, as you explained, these flood works were done in the 70s, and at that time, it was the standard approach of engineers to cement the sides of creeks to convey stormwater.
Yep.
And that approach isn't used anymore. And that it's, if we were doing this today, it would be a more naturalized approach with trees and shrubs, and the very things that you're taking out.
Mhm.
And it would be better for fish habitat and so on and so on. So my question is, did you look at the option for, naturalizing this creek as opposed to taking it back to the 70s?
Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, through your worship. I think I would say yes, it was considered, and I'll sort of try to explain why. It's unfortunately, is that in order to we're trying to find the best solution with what was, I guess, originally proposed in the 70s and what was originally designed and built, trying to find a balance between that approach and a natural approach. So the plan is not to take it back to that moonscape that you saw in the photograph, if you will, to recognize that there's value in the vegetation to provide the habitat, a more natural approach, absolutely. The challenge here, however, is that we're constricted by space, sort of laterally, sort of left and right. We're the dikes themselves have kind of sort of boxed us in a little bit. So we just have to make the best and do the best we can in terms of being able to get the waters through that corridor. A more natural approach would be that we've got a little bit of space to work with. The folks in the Netherlands use the phrase "room for the river." And that's great if you've just got the room or can make the room. Sometimes we can't. So it's just these are kind of some of the restrictions or constraints that we're working with. And we're trying to find that optimum solution between getting the water through, but also creating habitat and what have you. So the Black Ash Creek, for example, is another flood conveyance sort of piece of infrastructure through the town. But we took a slightly different approach there or at least a different approach was taken there at the time than what was done for Pretty River. So it's a number of different solutions available, and we're just having to work with the infrastructure that we have in place.
Does that assist, Councillor?
Yeah, I have a follow-up to that. So I understand the city of Kitchener is currently made a decision to look at all of its concrete creeks, if I can call them that way.
Sure.
And they're doing 3 a year to return them back to a more natural state. And I know the Don River in Toronto, of course, that's that naturalization project. That's what that's all about. Why can't we do that here? I mean, if Kitchener can do it.
Mark?
Thank you, through your worship. I think short answer is it can be done. Anything is possible, as it were. And these are some great ideas, and there's certainly lots of opportunities to have those kind of discussions. And I think that's kind of where we're at in terms of putting some ideas on the table as to what's possible and what that sort of solution might look like. And I think in the meantime, right now, we have an obligation to get this particular piece of infrastructure functioning as it was intended. And that doesn't sort of, I would encourage conversations around what some other possibilities would look like to look to flood management sort of infrastructure through the town.
Just one last point, Mr. Mayor, and that is, as you know, Mark, we walked through that, and it's the most beautiful part of our whole trail network.
Okay.
And the kids swimming holes there, and everyone fishes, and it's a beautiful little spot. And as much as this won't go back to a moonscape, I understand from one of our residents who was in your meeting 2 weeks ago that, well, anyway, what she recalled was up to 70% or more of the vegetation will be removed. So it might not be a moonscape, but it could be close. So anyway, I guess maybe this isn't a question, and maybe this is something I want to direct to our mayor. Mr. Mayor, I would like to bring a motion whenever you think it's an appropriate time, just to have council consider formally asking the NVCA to consider the options for a more naturalized approach to the flood works that have to be done before they commence these works. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and we'll bring that up under notices of motion at the end of the meeting. But I noticed that this NVCA CAO, Douglas Heavener, has his hand up, so I'll allow him to speak. Go ahead, please.
Through your worship, thank you very much. If I may, the reference that Councillor Hamlin is making to naturalized landscapes in this particular case, and the comparison to the cement aqueducts that have been developed in Kitchener and formerly in the Don River Valley Basin. Riprap is a rock system that sits on a natural land. There is no permeable barrier that prevents the roots from egressing into the soil and creating the treescape that you see now. So the riprap system that was utilized in this drainage way incorporates a natural landscape. When we talked about numbers of reducing natural habitat by 70%, that didn't include the treescape at this time. The treescape will remain in this first situation. We're going to remove 70% of the material that will include species that have egressed to become challenging for the landscape. We've got grapevine and Virginia creeper that are girdling and strangling trees. So those will be pulled down and removed. There's some invasive species types that run rampant on the bank that outdevelop or overdevelop some of the more natural native pollinators that we see. So our opinion is that when we do this first movement, what we'll do is we'll free that landscape to release a really nice pollinator understory that will allow us to have a really good ocular view of the treed landscape. And if Councillor can recall, when we were there, we did point out that many of the trees, in fact, I'd venture to say, without the complete census done on what species are there, but just in my view, as an arborist walking the site, the dynamic species is definitely ash. The highest proponent of trees in the channels 4 and 5 area where we were looking at working is ash. Many of them are in the stages of dying as a result of emerald ash borer. So in the future, they'll become problematic liability trees that the town will face. When those kids are out there enjoying that time in the stream, it would be horrific to see one of these trees free fall down and have a fatality. So this is an opportunity to reduce the town and the NBC's liability within the floodway, still provide a very natural landscape in the area. And one thing that we haven't talked about today is how we address the outward skirt of the dike itself. Mark's talked about the water flowing from berm to berm. And when we walked that habitat, you noticed that there were trees aligned on the exterior of that space. We're looking at a way where we can try to save as many of the trees along the exterior landscape so that the pedestrian view, the homeowner view, the wonderful horizon views from your house lots back to the pretty river won't be removed and won't be scarified or stratified in a way that it becomes that moonscape. So we have really looked and tried to encourage as much as we can. From a fish habitat aspect, we're looking at maintaining 1 meter to 1.5 meters along the edge of the river to provide shadowing and shading for the stream. Our ecologist, Dave Featherstone, has worked really closely with Mark and talked to our contractor about the potential of maintaining that area. So we're really trying to look, I want to convey to council that we are really trying to look at this This has been a systematic approach, and we'll continue to take that. And Councillor Hamlin, certainly welcome your comments, and we will look forward to looking at a natural landscape for the citizens. This is a unique feature within your town, and we want to support it the best way we can. But we want to provide safety to flooding, and we want to provide safety to liability from tree fall. So that's what we're after. And I hope we can come up with a wonderful compromise and work together to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Hefner.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to clarify one matter that the CAO has just
Okay, this will be the last
mentioned.
point, Councillor. We've
Yes,
got the
that's
full meeting to
fine.
go
Thank
through.
you.
So
Yeah,
last,
I
go
only
ahead.
have one more. I just was wondering when you were saying that, you know, the trees, well, first of all, I'm happy to hear that the NVCA will maintain the trees on the property and take down the dead ones. Good stewardship. But my comment was, when I recall during the tour, being told that all of the trees except ones greater than 3 inches in diameter would come down. And then likely at the end of it all, the only trees that would survive would be the ones right on the edge of the pathway. Now, what you're saying to me today is something different. Has the plan changed, or did I misunderstand it?
Go ahead, CAO Hefner.
Thank you. Through the mayor, if I may. I think there may have been some misunderstanding. I think our intent when we did the original walk was to convey that we'll be removing that understory canopy and doing a really strong sweep along both banks. And then we would be able to make a real calculated inventory of how many trees would have to come out of the basin itself. We really don't know that. We're looking at the flood modeling that Mark ran, and it's suggesting that there's a lot of trees that are going to have to come out. But we'll be able to do that calculation after we do this first removal phase and have a better understanding on the number of trees that'll have to come out.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a full discussion, and I know the NVCA chair, Councillor McLeod, you want any last word on this?
Thanks very much. And I know that the scientists at the Conservation Authority have been working hard to find the balance between making this piece of infrastructure function the way that it is designed to, and which it has to, if we end up with a regulatory event, which is a storm similar to Hurricane Hazel. And so I think that it's incumbent upon us all to understand that this piece of infrastructure is exactly that and needs to be maintained, and that there are neighborhoods in Collingwood that could not have ever been built had this piece of infrastructure not have also been built. And so I'd like to applaud the scientists and communications folks, et cetera, who are here from the NVCA today for their hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I think we're going to move on to our next deputation. It's been a very good discussion. So thank you to everyone from the NVCA on the update and the communications plan. And
thank you very much.
We will see how this goes. Thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you.
That brings us to item 6.2, waste management concerns requiring town support. And we have David Conning from the chair of the Collingwood BIA to present to us. Is Dave here? And Sue Nicholson. So I see Dave and Sue. Is anyone else participating? I just want to make sure I introduce everybody. All right, go ahead, Dave.
Hello. Sorry, a little slow on the uptake there. Thank you very much, Mayor and Deputy Mayor, Council, and staff. I wanted to discuss the issue of the new waste collection system being introduced by the county. And I'd like to start with just a little bit of background on what we have done so far in our discussions to try to work with the county in a collaborative way to solve some of the issues that have come up. Just before we go to the first slide, this discussion started in the first week of January of this year. On the 21st of January, we sent a letter to the warden Following discussions with other BIAs and county staff, as an example, Guelph, we spoke with their BIA, and their immediate reaction was, "Don't let this happen to your downtown." They actually used language not suitable for this meeting. They said there's nowhere to put these bins. They ended up living on the street. Everyone is using any bin that is there, and there's simply nowhere to put them. The reply from the warden on February 4th was general sort of introductory comments and didn't really address our issues. We replied to the warden again with more specific issues, those being, where do you put the bins when they're not out for collection? That we really cannot have them live on the street. There are accessibility issues. There are heritage guidelines. Snow removal and plowing is a large issue. And with the diagonal parking, how can they be lifted by the truck? The reply on March 4th from Rob McCullough, the Director of Solid Waste Management for the county, offered answers that we really deemed non-viable. I won't go through all of our discussions, of course, but in June, the county sent out letters announcing the new system, and our BIA office immediately started getting concern calls and email from members. In July, there was a request by Deputy Mayor Hull to the county that the bins for the downtown be postponed for delivery while we continue our discussion. The immediate reaction from GM Rob Elliott of the county was the bin delivery schedule change is virtually impossible, and as a quote. Later, after we discussed it a little more, they did agree to halt deliveries, which is why we don't have the bins in the downtown right now. In August, they did agree to meet with us in a Zoom meeting, and we had another Zoom follow-up meeting 2 weeks later on the 27th. Between these two meetings, county staff and the waste contractor, Miller, came to the downtown to look around. They did not contact town staff, BIA, or Deputy Mayor Hull, who had made the first request to do this, which was concerning. And on September 15th, the letter from County General Manager states that they could pick up in the back lanes of here, Ontario, only between 1st and 3rd. And that really doesn't solve our issues. So here we are. Next slide, please. These are the main concerns identified in the downtown. There, as I've stated, there's no place to store the bins. They will have to live on the street. There is no place to put them. So our downtown, our beautiful downtown, will be littered with these bins. This creates issues of accessibility, cleaning, and snow removal. And also it is difficult. It's actually not possible for the tenant to determine which bins are for which units, because the bins are dropped off. They are tagged with a barcode. They are tagged in the system, in the county system, as to which bins go to which units, but they're not identified anywhere on the bins. So when multiple bins get dropped off to one address, there's no telling whose is whose. The number of bins, we just finally, a week before last, received a list of where these bins are being dropped and how many in the downtown. There will be 975 bins delivered to here, Ontario Street alone between Hume and First, 975 bins. There are 2,028 bins being delivered, expected to be delivered throughout the BIA. It will not be physically possible to place these at the curbside, according to the county direction, where there are multiple units at one address. The following several illustrations show the number of bins scheduled to be delivered at specific addresses. The next slide, please. So what we have done is shown, these are the actual number of bins for that address that are being delivered. This is 140 here, Ontario Street. 15 bins are being delivered to that location. Next slide, please. This is 146, 2 doors down from the previous slide. 15 bins are expected to be delivered to that location. Next slide, please. Across the street from those two locations, this is 143 here, Ontario, where 9 bins are being delivered. And again, these are individual addresses. From 2 other examples in terms of a block, from Simcoe Street to the entrance to the Eddie Bush on the east side of here, Ontario, there are 5 businesses there. 60 bins are scheduled to be dropped off in front of those 5 businesses, one of which has a patio. And this is not just here, Ontario, by the way, it's throughout the BIA. On St. Marie, for example, between 34 and 48, which is a beautiful old restored row housing, Collingwood olive oil and so on, 48 bins are scheduled to be delivered in front of those businesses. The next slide, please. In the previous slide, that storefront is 12.4 feet wide. On collection day, there would be 6 bins put in front. And according to the spacing required for pickup, that spacing requires 21.4 feet. This is just a typical example of some of the locations where the bins will be going. Next slide, please. Placement of the bins. Bins must be placed within 8 feet of the traveled roadway. But our angled parking on here, Ontario, is more than 14 feet deep. So there is really no way for the truck to pick them up there unless we somehow kept all of the cars off the road. And I just don't know. I don't know how it can physically be done. I don't think I'm telling anyone something new here with staff and council, but it's important for us all to recognize how difficult this will be. Next slide, please. We risk the integrity of the Downtown Heritage District if we allow this program to proceed. Downtown Collingwood is an economic driver for the community. It is a federally recognized designated heritage district, a tourist attraction filled with unique shops and culture, unique shops and restaurants, an arts and culture center, a district that has invested millions of dollars, both public and private, in infrastructure, the built form, and beautification. And it is a mixed use commercial and residential district. The BIA and municipality must work together on a solution for this. The BIA, in the BIA, Ontario BIA handbook, the first 2 major responsibilities are beautification and promotion of the area. And we spend $500,000 contributed by our members to keep the downtown beautiful and functioning properly and promoted well. Next slide, please. So the next question is, what will we do? And frankly, to the town and to council, respectfully, what will you do? And how can the BIA help? And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair Conning. Councillor, are there any questions or comments on this presentation? I can tell you, Dave, that the mayor or deputy mayor and I both sit on county council. You know that, and county council is in charge of waste management. So these issues are being raised. We are having a workshop in October to look at options in terms of cart sizes and hopefully pickup. So we certainly understand your concerns, and the deputy mayor has been raising those at county, as have I, and we will continue to do that. And we will continue to keep you in the loop and involved.
Thank you very much.
All right. Councillor Hammond, you have a question or comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm wondering if it's possible to assist the BIA by advising the county that we don't want those bins in our downtown area. I mean, regardless of, you know, the questions that we have for our residential community, if the photos that we've seen tonight are representative, and I believe they are, really, we don't want that on our main street. And regardless of what alternative, you know, I don't know what the alternative is, but I think really we need a different alternative. So
it's certainly a countywide issue, and there are alternatives. You can opt out, and that is part of some of the discussions, as some condominiums do. But, you know, I think in the name of efficiencies, it would be nice to see if we can find a median way where the county can continue to serve, but in a way that services the BIA in a way that's conducive to business and understands the area. So this is a hot topic. It is a very big topic. The switch to the automated system has been a long time coming, and the automated system has really been used by most larger municipalities and regional governments because of labor shortage issues. And we have seen over the last 3 years with our county pickup, it hasn't hurt us in Collingwood too badly because we're on Mondays. But the average driver, and there's one driver per vehicle who also gets out, is in and out of their vehicle 2,000 times a day, hoisting those garbage cans. So retaining after training those employees has been very difficult. And we've had to go through lengthy negotiations with our current provider to keep that contract going. So the automated carts, I think, is a thing of necessity, and it's the implementation that we're going to have to work through. And the deputy mayor and I are very aware of these concerns, both in the BIA and in the community, about the carts. I don't know if the deputy mayor. Go ahead, deputy mayor.
Thank you. First, I'd like to extend my thanks to Mr. Conning for taking the opportunity to speak to council this evening. For those that were not aware, Mr. Conning's daughter was married on Saturday, and I'm sure he had bigger and better priorities than preparing to speak to us tonight. So congratulations to your daughter on a beautiful wedding at the Drake in Toronto. I just wanted to briefly comment without going into the fact that I do have a notice of motion to read in tonight that would be tabled for discussion next week. But these discussions with the county started 7 months ago. And I'm not going to air the laundry as it relates to how we've arrived here tonight. But we do need to find a solution that works for Collingwood. This is very much at the heart of the brand of Collingwood. The downtown is an aesthetic jewel, and it is paramount that we preserve and protect. I will say that in fairness to the county, one of the positive outcomes in arriving at where we are with this new system is that they took the concern from the BIA to heart in terms of transferring our collection date from Monday to Wednesday. And we hope that that will help to mitigate some of the challenges that we've had with people putting out garbage, say on a Friday evening or a Saturday. And then, of course, due to natural environment, having town staff or BIA staff have to go around after a collection date to pick up items that have been either blown or simply left behind. The one thing that the bins or no bins won't change, And this is a reflection countywide, has nothing to do with Collingwood, is it will not change human behavior. So, today, mid-afternoon, I went for a walk to clear my head. And as I'm walking, I couldn't help but notice that today was recycling collection date. And yet there were multiple garbage, bins of garbage that had been taken out. And of course, this is the wrong week. Or I'm sure that we've all noticed, for example, that, bags of waste yardage and leaves have been collecting at the end of various driveways for the last couple of weeks in anticipation of collection. And yet collection has been designated for the 1st of October. And I would really encourage all residents, cart or no cart, is that if you haven't already, download the app for Simcoe Collects. It's a fantastic resource. 6 o'clock Sunday night, you get a notification as to exactly what the week is ahead of you, what's permitted, what's not. It has a built-in wizard that allows you to go in and search for items to clearly identify what is allowed, what's not allowed. If it's not allowed, how you can dispose it through one of our waste county facilities, whether it be on the 10th concession here or on the one that's north of Stainer off of Highway 26. But back to the bins in the downtown, there has been ongoing dialogue between county staff, me, and the mayor, as well as members of the BIA. I had correspondence as late as this afternoon, and I've been back and forth with our warden with regards to a meeting potentially tomorrow. I truly hope that we will be able to come to some type of a resolution that, as I say, will protect the integrity, because it doesn't matter whose issue or whose responsibility it is. The public don't care, nor should they. The fact is that if they come down to our community as a resident, as a taxpayer, as a guest to the community, they want to see a community that's well preserved, that the brand is protected, and that it's a clean environment. And having bins that are cluttered up and down a street because people can't get to and from, or they can't be properly stored, or they're left on the street 3 days after collection is not acceptable. And it's my promise to the BIA that I'll continue to raise this issue on their behalf in an effort to come up with a positive resolution as we quickly approach November the 1st. And with that, I'll step down off of my garbage pedestal. Thank you.
That was a great card speech there. Thank you for that, Deputy Mayor, and congratulations, Dave, on your daughter's marriage. I hope it was a wonderful event. It was certainly great weather. Are there any other questions or comments, Council? Seeing none, thank you both for your presentation today and for all you've done over the summer to make our downtown shine.
Thank you.
And that brings us to item 7.1, update on water capacity and land use planning study. And I will pass it over to CAO Skinner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think that there is a presentation that I'll run through quickly. We have done this presentation a number of times for council and hopefully for our what I hope is a large contingent of regular watchers. And I'm going to start going through some of the standard material a little more quickly. But at any time and in any meeting, I'd be happy to pause or repeat some of the standard material. Next slide, please. So the resolution that we're and the reason why we're updating council and the public every week is related to this resolution that's on slide 2, and we do have that information included in this this update. Next slide. The situation is set out here, but we are reacting as quickly as possible to temporarily and transparently pause most development. Certainly not all development, and you'll see as we go through the deck that certain amount is going ahead, and we are doing some work to move past this situation as quickly as possible. And anyone who has concerns about wanting to go forward with work should certainly talk to the town, and we'll see what we can do to inform you about what can move forward. The next slide, please. I'm going to talk about 2 areas. The first one is our water capacity, so the ability to provide water.
and through our environmental services work. And next slide, please. So there's been a lot that has happened recently. The water treatment plant expansion, we had a report at Development and Operations Committee about ultraviolet disinfection that was endorsed and will be moving forward for a council confirmation. But basically we have found options for accelerating our disinfection and therefore moving more quickly than 2025 to alleviate our summer winter disparity and make more water available. There's also been a tender issued for the ultraviolet disinfection, and we've done that in parallel. The environmental services area with our consultant has done that, so we'll know the interim option, what's available, how much it will cost, and it actually will set the disinfection type for our new plant that will ultimately be installed. So that has closed, and there's a group working on the evaluation of those proposals from the private sector. And there's a number of meetings that are mentioned here, all of them involving different folks that are very important for the conversation. There was one on September 8th about the plant expansion with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks District Office and their approval section. And we also have, I'm skipping a bullet, but I'll go back to it, a meeting with the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks Assistant Deputy Minister to speak about the importance of our project and the need for the ministry to support us on accelerated approvals and hopefully additional attention that will support Collingwood and the other municipalities that we supply. So that has been set up for the 23rd. And then we're going to meet again with the local folks and our partner municipalities around the end of the month on the 29th. We also have consultant work in progress. There was a request to have a third-party review of the chlorine addition amount to make sure that we've maximized what we can do from a chlorine perspective and haven't gone too far. So that person has been hired and is starting the work. And as well, you may be aware that Simcoe County has a water and wastewater service review underway. RV Anderson has been hired to lead that work on behalf of the county, and they are working hard to confirm a date with a number of municipalities that are along the regional pipeline that runs between New Tecumseth and Collingwood to talk about their longer term water supply needs. Next slide, please. So from a drinking water plant expansion perspective, we're looking at the top right of expanded water capacity achieved in the winter of 2025-26. And so far, starting from the bottom left, you're aware we've had an award. And we've started to add in the top left a couple of items that are somewhat new to this diagram from the last couple of weeks. The potential advanced disinfection ultraviolet is to be confirmed for the winter of 22-23. And we've also started to talk with Director Slama and her group about the idea for potential additional filtration and capacity in advance of the expanded water treatment plant. And there will be further information coming to council and the public about that potential. It's going through the our technical consultant and our staff at the moment. Next slide, please. The remaining water supply as of the 3rd of September is presented here. I believe it to be the same as the last update or very close to it. With the summer-winter differential, the remaining amount of water in equivalent single dwelling units is 495. So that would be in the next 5 years, and not including our safety factor. And if you were looking at the maximum day demand in meters cubed per day, that would be 447 meters cubed per day left. Should we be able to solve the summer-winter differential, the remaining amount would be the bottom line of this chart, which does give us 700 or 800 more units, which would be very welcome news for us and our community. So our staff are working very hard on that project. Next slide, please. On the planning side, which is the land use planning policy study that will allow us to move past our interim control bylaw state. Next slide. We have a detailed schedule that is provided on the slide. Hopefully the slide is available offline for those who are very interested in the tiny details on the slide. But most importantly, staff did go through a workshop on best practices, the steering committee on the staff side last week. And within the next week or so, individual discussions with one or small groups of council members are scheduled to take place. So hopefully councillors have been approached by the consultants. And there is a public sessions and meetings with the development community on the lines 11 and 12 that are shown there toward the beginning of November, end of October. So we're working our way out to being in a communication with the public. This is a very important discussion that we need to have with the entire community. Next slide, please. Since the last update, all that, and actually I think even before the last update, everyone who applied for an exemption has been notified of council's decisions in July and earlier. I want to emphasize to folks that the exemptions process is really just to get us through the study period. Afterwards, pending council approval of the recommendations, water would be managed according to the findings of the study. And I'd mentioned the early meetings with members of council. Next slide, please. So it was a very interesting meeting with our internally, the consultant, which is I'm having a brain blip on the consultant's name. I'll come to me in a moment. They had done an immense amount of research when they met with the steering committee last week. Some of the key findings that were presented to us included how other municipalities have anchored an allocation approach in their official plan, how councils approved the allocation policies, that much of the allocation policies were based on different criteria, everything from first come, first serve to potentially looking at criteria related to the goals of the municipality in a complete community, which may be things like affordable housing, use of water per unit. It may include things like employment provision, et cetera. There were criteria in other municipalities about when water allocation is committed and for how long a developer may keep that water. And how do we keep tension in the system to ensure the allocation is used in a timely manner, either by payment of fees, timeframes, et cetera, and performance measures for that use. Very interesting things that I'm looking forward to that community conversation about. Next slide, please. Same exemptions we've had all along, maybe in a little more of a consumable format. Next slide, please. And no changes to the next steps. If you've been granted an exemption, your application can continue. And if you've not been granted an exemption, we'll continue with processing applications, but we're not going to make recommendations to council until you have an exemption or we finish the ICBL. Next slide, please. Building statistics as of the end of last month indicate that we're on par with past building. Certainly has been lots of activity this year. Next slide. There's some more detail here. The 12-month accumulated dwelling starts are reaching up to the 3-year median. And that bodes well for the amount of work and the amount of residential residences becoming available in town at this part of the year. Next slide, please. Building permits issued in the last 3 years, you'll see that there's right up to August, we have the data available. So we've been on par, and in some cases for the 2021 gray, third one to the right bar with other years. However, in August, we have trailed off somewhat. As we don't have further exemptions coming forward at the moment, I expect that we will continue to trail somewhat through the year, but there are still some building permits being processed for those who have exemptions and haven't received or applied for their permit yet. Next slide, please. And the accumulated inspections completed are somewhat in line with the building. We're nearing the 3-year median. And I think that's the last slide. Next slide. Thank you, Council, and we'd be happy to field questions to the best of our ability, but otherwise you are up to date with our rigorous approach to keep this very important project moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Skinner. Council, any questions or comments on the update? Councillor McLeod, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CAO and possibly to Director Slama, but also possibly to the building department. We were told as a council how very desperate the situation was that we put in this ICBL, and that building was going to come to a screeching halt, and that much economic development would be imperiled by what we were doing. And I'm curious to know, for those exemptions which we have, which we found room for in meetings in May or whatever, is there a percentage that you can tell me that have actually applied for their building permits, that they were close enough to that stage?
Would like to take that question. CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through Councillor McLeod, I do not know what percentage have applied. I believe it to be a reasonably high percentage, and I'd be happy to follow up with the chief building official, Greg Miller, on the statistics that we have between the exemptions provided and the building permits pulled. All of those items were very close. All the exemptions that were provided were very close to being ready for construction in 2021. And I would be surprised that a lot of them have not moved forward. We will follow up and provide that information.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Council, any other questions or comments? I'll just say that it's very exciting to see the UV disinfection initiative moving forward and the retrofit. That will be a very important thing to get online next November to get rid of our summer winter differential. And again, thank you to our engineering community that helped in that initiative. And it's good to see that come forward and have such a successful impact. So thank you to staff for that. Okay, that brings us then to item 8, which is consent agenda. And the resolution reads as follows. The council herein received the general consent agenda, and further that the information and opinions provided in the general consent agenda items are those of the authors and are not verified or approved as being correct. We have 3 items tonight, all of them proclamations. Item 8.1 is a proclamation, National Forest Week, September 19th to 25th. And the clock tower will be illuminated green from September 6th to 26th. Item 8.2, proclamation World Car Free Day, which we've discussed, which is this coming Wednesday, September 22nd. And the clock tower will be illuminated green on September 22nd. And the final proclamation is Le Jour des Franco-Ontariens et des Franco-Ontariennes. So Franco-Ontarian Day, which is the 25th of September. And the clock tower will be illuminated green on September 25th. So I'll look for a mover and a seconder to receive the consent agenda. I've got Councillor Berman and the Deputy Mayor. We will first pull the motion, and then I will ask if anyone would like to pull an item for comment. So to vote to receive, all in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Are there any items, Council, that you would like to pull to address? Seeing none, that brings us to, my apologies, Deputy Mayor.
I actually would like to comment on both 8.1 and 8.2.
All right. I don't see any others, so go ahead.
With your indulgence, as opposed to bringing it forward during the county report, I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention the proclamation that is part of our consent agenda speaks specifically to the town of Collingwood. But today I just wanted to let you know that Simcoe County was named Forest Capital of Canada for 2022. And it is significant in the context that this is the second time that the county has won this prestigious award. It is nice to have it's more than nice, to have the national recognition, both in terms of the importance of our forests, which are significant in terms of land holdings, but the stewardship that the county provides in maintaining the significant asset. We don't have any county forests within the borders of town of Collingwood, but as a resident of County of Simcoe, we certainly have the opportunity to access many of the forests, access the trails for recreational and health purposes. And it just speaks to the importance of recognizing National Forest Week and the fact that the county has been recognized again for a second time for their stewardship, which is fantastic. And then if I may, just very quickly, World Car Free Day. This is an initiative that is global in reach. And as Councillor Doherty has already expressed, again, due to significant efforts of the Collingwood Climate, and I never get this correct, I apologize, the Collingwood Climate Action Team, is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. I think that this is fantastic, and I hope that people will take a look at what they have put together in terms of the information, in terms of some of the things that we take for granted in terms of distance and how much of the community is accessible within a radius by either bike or by foot. And that the fact that they reached out to the BIA and to the municipality about running this project within our downtown and elsewhere in the community to encourage people to be able to park in parking spaces traditionally used by vehicle for other means. And again, some will look at it as, well, it's a drop in the bucket, so what? Or they'll look at it and say, well, this is another anti-vehicle initiative, et cetera. And it's not. And I'm back on my soapbox here, but a couple of weeks ago, I watched, and I'm not a huge fan, but I watched with interest the F1 race from the Netherlands, Formula One. I mean, if there ever was a carbon sporting event, it's Formula One racing, with IndyCar and NASCAR probably a close second. The significance of the event that took place in the Netherlands is that you had tens upon thousands of people attending a national sporting event, which was won by their national driver. And 95% of the people who attended that event got to the event by foot, bike, or public transportation. And you compare that to, say in a non-COVID year, if 40,000 people were attending an event at Rogers Centre to watch the Blue Jays, or 20,000 were attending an event for a concert, or an event, the Toronto Maple Leafs at Scotia Bank, I dare say the number would be nowhere near 95%. And so this particular day and this particular event, in terms of closing a couple of parking spaces, in the grand scheme of things, may not seem significant, but it's a tremendous starting point, and it's a starting point of conversation in terms of how we can use our trail system, how we can use the Maple Street Bike Pilot project to change the conversation from a vehicle-centric community to one that is embracing and adopting different modes of transportation. And I applaud the efforts, as I know Councillor Doherty has already acknowledged, of the Collingwood Climate Action Team for their initiatives. and I hope that people will embrace it. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And just on the issue of the Simcoe County Forest, it was the first managed forest in Ontario, and that goes back to 1923. So it's coming up 100 years. So Simcoe County has clearly been out in front on that important initiative, and it is self-funding. So it's not supported by tax dollars at all. It is entirely self-funded as it grows. So thank you for that. Unless there's any other items to be pulled, namely 8.3, we're going to move on, and that will be to item 9. And 9.1 is minutes from the Police Services Board. The resolution reads as follows: that the minutes of the following boards be hereby received and recommendations contained therein be approved. And 9.1 is special Police Services Board minutes of July 19, 2021. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Jeffrey and Councillor Berman. Thank you for that. Are there any questions or comments before I call the vote? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. That will bring us then to item 10.1, Standing Committee Report. And this is from our Strategic Initiatives meeting of September 7th, 2021. It's a lengthy resolution, and so I want Council to remember that these are items that were passed unanimously. So if anybody wants to pull one for a change of direction, not just a comment, but to actually change the direction of the recommendation, your opportunity is to do this now, once I've read it in. So I'll read it in as follows. The Council received the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee report from its meeting held September 7, 2021, and hereby approve the recommendations contained within the report as presented. Local optometrists, provincial underfunding of eye care, recommendation to write to AMO to lobby the provincial government to ensure optometrists are being paid fairly and residents are receiving critical eye care. Report 2 CAO 2021-11, 2021 Progress Report, Community-Based Strategic Plan, and Q2 Operational Plan. And the recommendation is to receive those items for information. Item 3, C 2021-14, Procedural Bylaw Review and Update. And the recommendation is to refer the report back to staff to gather input and additional suggestion from members of council for consideration at an upcoming Strategic Initiatives Standing Committee meeting. Item 4, T 2021-14, Asset Sale Proceeds Part 2, Reserve Fund Policies. The recommendation to adopt the Collingwood Greening Legacy Fund, the Collingwood Arts and Culture Legacy Fund, the Collingwood Hospital Redevelopment Fund policies, and the Collingwood Multi-Use Facility Fund. Item 4.5 is T 2021-16, 2022 Budget, Preliminary Status Report for discussion. And the recommendation is the council direct staff to bring the budget tax rate increase of 1% or less. The operating portion of the 2022 budget be capped at 3% above the 2021 operating budget, and any excess budgeted into capital assets, renewal projects, depleted reserves, and reserve funds, and endorse the budget planning schedule. And mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor McLeod. Council, before I call the vote, are there any items a council member wishes to pull to change the direction of the recommendation? Seeing none, then I'm going to call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Are there any items council would like to pull for comment or questions? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Worship. When I reviewed the staff report T 2021-14, the asset sale proceeds, definition of parameters of the various new legacy funds that were created, I did have a concern about one of the definitions of the Greening Legacy Fund, and that was, and I'll quote, to incorporate the creation of more green spaces by adding vegetation, trees, and plant-based products. And although that unquestionably is green, in my mind, I had considered that the Greening Legacy Fund should be for innovative projects and new projects. So along the lines of alternative energy sources, green roofs, reduction of CO2 emissions, and so on. And further that the creation of green spaces and planting of trees, et cetera, is already covered by the Parks Department in either their operating budgets on an annual basis or when growth is required through development charges. However, I was assured by the treasurer that this particular definition would be differentiated in its application from what we are accustomed to seeing as greening and planting initiatives. And I'm satisfied with that answer, but I admit that I will be watching closely because I would not, just speaking for myself, and I'm sure other members of council would not want to see these funds diluted in any way by being allocated to projects where they could be funded from existing departmental resources.
Thank you for that, Councillor Doherty. I see heads nodding, and as well, the asset sale proceeds was one of the underlying principles was that these would be for foundational and transformational projects. So I think the issue about operating dollars is duly noted, and staff are well aware of that. So thank you. Council, any other questions or comments on the items that we just passed? Seeing none, that brings us to item 10.1.2. The resolution reads that staff report CCS 2021-1 International Development Programming through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities FCM be received, and that council support an application in response to a FCM future call for municipal community participants in an international program that aligns with the priorities of the community-based strategic plan. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Berman, Councillor Jeffrey. Are there any questions or comments, council, before I call the vote on this? Seeing none, I will call the vote then. All in favor? And opposed? This brings us to item 10.2, Standing Committee Report, Corporate Community Services, September 7, 2021. And these were passed unanimously, so we will be dealing with them as a block. And the resolution reads that council received the Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee Report from its meeting held September 7, 2021 and September 14, 2021, and hereby approve the recommendations contained within the report as presented. Item 1, CE 2021-15. Order, yes, I see your card and I will sever that off for you. So we will leave the inclusive change initiative out of this. So I'll read the first three. Order of Collingwood policy update. The recommendation is that the revised order of Collingwood policy be approved and that the nomination procedures reinstate the unsuccessful nominations will be held for 1 additional year for further consideration. Item 2, T 2021-15 BIA COVID-19 Relief Program Initiative Review. Recommendation that staff report back if a future opportunity exists for potential reimbursement of BIA costs that would be applicable to provincial COVID-19 funding requests. And item 3, PRC 2021-6 Herbert Wilson Legacy. Recommendation to name the parklands adjacent to the Admiral Collingwood Public School the Wilson Sheffield Park. Approve the installation of a memorial and direct staff to draft an apology letter to the Wilson family. I look to Chair McLeod and Vice Chair Madigan to move and second that. And are there any items that people would like to pull for a change in direction of the recommendation? Seeing none, then I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Are there any items that council would like to pull to comment on? Seeing none, I will look to the Deputy Mayor to lead the meeting for the stated conflict, and we will deal with item 4 from the Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee meeting held September 7 and September 14, and approve the recommendations contained in item PRC 2021-7, supporting an inclusive change. Recommendation to include in the 2022 budget process a rebate of $30,000 of the Collingwood minor hockey invoice to change their logo to be more inclusive, conditional on the destruction of existing equipment that bears the current Blackhawks logo. I'll look to Chair McLeod and Vice Chair Madigan to move and second that. Are there any questions or comments on that item before I call the vote, Council? Go ahead, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, and this question may be directed to Director Culver. I'm curious as to who initiated the review of the logo and the consideration of a new logo for Collingwood Minor Hockey. Was it the hockey club itself, or was this something that came from the town to the hockey club?
Director Culver.
Your Worship, I think the report states that we've had conversations going back approximately 5 years. Really sort of, it's been a friendly dialogue back and forth to sort of help create new understandings. But I would say that the organization took the change upon itself.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Councillor?
No, thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other questions or comments, then I will call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Clerk, if you can let the Deputy Mayor know and come back in. That brings us to item 11, motions. We have no motions tonight. So that brings us to item 12, which is notices of motion. And 12.1 is a waste management cart program solution for the BIA. It's a notice of motion from the Deputy Mayor. So I'll turn it over to the Deputy Mayor to read it in.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. With your indulgence, I'll begin. Whereas waste management in the county is the County of Simcoe's responsibility, and the decisions of their collection program impact the municipalities, businesses, and residents, and sometimes the solution is not the right fit for all. And whereas the Council of the Town of Collingwood and Downtown Collingwood BIA Board of Management continue to have significant concerns with the new waste management cart program, and in particular within the downtown historical commercial district, including size of the bins and ability to transfer bins up and down narrow stairwells, storage of bins, access to bins on the curb where vehicles are parked, enforcement of bins that are left out before and after pickup, the aesthetics of over 1,000 bins in a small commercial geographic area. Therefore, be it resolved that Council requests the County of Simcoe determine a solution, in parentheses or brackets, solutions for Collingwood, Downtown Collingwood BIA, and the regional BIAs and municipalities that are negatively impacted by the new county waste management cart program to immediately identify solutions in downtowns for both residential and commercial units that ensure and maintain the historical, commercial, and aesthetic character of the area, that the enforcement for non-compliance, as well as consideration to reinstating traditional garbage pickup in these areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So that motion will come up for discussion at our next meeting next week. And that brings us to item 13, which is the county report. You're on a roll here. Councillor Hamlin, you have a question?
As I had asked earlier, Mr. Mayor, there was a motion I wanted to read in relative to the NVCA work.
Okay, go ahead.
I haven't come up with any whereas clauses yet, but the motion itself would be that council formally requests the NVCA to review options to naturalize the Pretty River water course as the best approach to improving the town's stormwater infrastructure, and further that the results of this review be presented to council before the fall 2021 work is undertaken.
Okay, and I'll leave you to work with Clerk Almus if you want to attach any whereases to that. Brings us item 13 then, the county report. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I was going to touch base specific to three items. The first, I think, which is a really good news story I've already talked about, and that was in relation to Forest Week and the announcement that was made earlier today. The third item, maybe I'll just speak to because it's the easiest of the three, and that is that November the 4th, which is a Tuesday, has been the day allocated or assigned, I should say, for the staff of the county to bring forward the budget. And as always, these are public meetings. If there are those within the town of Collingwood that would like to put forth comment or perhaps have questions about the budget process, they could certainly address either myself, the mayor, or they're welcome to contact the County of Simcoe Direct through the many channels that they've got established for communication. And then the last, I just wanted to make people aware of, and then I'll speak to it a little bit further, and that is that on the 26th of October, again, it's a Tuesday, we'll be meeting as Council and Committee of the Whole in the morning, and then the afternoon of the 26th, we have got from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. time allocated for a special meeting. It's actually deemed a workshop, and it is dedicated to the issue of waste collection and specifically to the issue of the carts. I think that it is fair to say that there has been much discussion, not only within the town of Collingwood, but elsewhere as it relates to the carts and the cart system and the fact that we're moving rapidly toward November the 1st for our implementation date. I feel as a person who supported this program, and I still do, that the good outweighs the negative by a long shot, and that when the program is successfully implemented post November the 1st, that once people have an opportunity to experience the system, I think that the overwhelming majority will embrace it. That's not to dismiss nor diminish the fact that there are issues that are being raised. And I know that our own mayor, for example, has been engaged in speaking and has met directly with residents who have voiced concerns. Those same residents have voiced their concerns directly to the other 31 members of county council and staff. And they tend, they're not always, but they tend to be in neighborhoods that were maybe constructed in a fashion that more of a row house as opposed to single lots, that type of situation, or where the garages were never built to accommodate an oversized vehicle, let alone a vehicle plus anything else. And therefore they do have true size constraints. Some of the issues in terms of being able to access front to back simply can't not be accommodated regardless of the size of the cart. I mean, the reality is if you can't get front to back of your own property, that's an issue. But certainly, you know, the evidence that's been put forward by residents, particularly in our West End, as it relates to the size and the opportunity from going from one size maybe to a smaller, would give them the opportunity not only to accommodate the carts, but they'd be able to do it in their garage, for example. And something that's been reiterated over and over again is they're not opposed to the carts. What they're opposed to is the size and the fact that they feel it will devalue the community in which they take aesthetic pride in maintaining what they have invested in. Fair point, point taken. And so the purpose of the workshop really, I think, is to identify what are opportunities that the collective 32 members of council can do sooner than later to alleviate some of these concerns countywide. When the project was first put in place, there was a pilot project that was established to the south end of the county, I believe in New Tecumseh. And, you know, there have been questions, and they're fair questions, as to why that pilot project maybe wasn't extended to other areas of the county, or why a need for something that maybe, you know, the answer was self-evident. Again, point well taken. So these are things that I hope that will be addressed. At our last meeting of council and then committee of whole, there was a report that was brought forward that established sort of the framework for the conversation that'll take place on the 26th. There was discussion from those who opposed this project in the first place, those who wanted to move on with the purchase of smaller bins immediately. But I think the majority felt, myself included, and I believe the mayor, based on his voting record, we felt that it was important to take the conversation to the workshop so that we move forward in the right manner. I think that your mayor has championed in terms of communicating the concerns from residents locally, particularly those on the west side of town, and has certainly heard those concerns. You have all heard those concerns because you've been copied on the communication. And I'm confident that those concerns, which are being echoed by other communities, whether it be Innisfil, Bradford, West Gwillimbury, et cetera, that have smaller developments that have been built in the same type of framework over the last decade, that don't have the same conveniences of, say, a single detached home, that those voices will be heard and that the county will move in a different direction as it relates to the carts. That said, I do state, and I stand on this, I supported, and I continue to support the program. And in maybe a bit of irony in the sense, because I just tabled a motion to move in a different direction as it relates to the downtown. But the reality is that there's an underlying story to why we moved in this direction. And that is that waste collection, as it relates to the actual physical pickup, the actual costs, and the returns, the fact that the recycling market collapsed several years ago, the fact that employment is diminishing because people can get jobs in other sectors that are paid much better, that are less labor intensive, have all created critical issues as it relates to waste management. And it's not an issue that is specific to the county of Simcoe. It is certainly one that is felt across the country and across the industry. So, and I've heard from people time and time again, and again, I hate to go back to our residents of the West Side, but I will. And you've heard that, and you've read the comments. Oftentimes, they'll preface by saying, I'm not opposed to this system, because for them, it's not a new system. For them, they've come from communities that, quite frankly, embraced the system a decade ago. And they see the value. They understand the benefits of the fact that they don't have to pick up, a neighbor's garbage that was torn apart by seagulls, or recycling that was blown down the street in the winter because of the wind, that type of thing. So they see the inherent value. They also understand the value of the fact that this is an industry that has faced a critical shortage of labor. No different than the fact that, and not to identify one specific, but I will, because it's a brand everybody knows, but McDonald's, a global industry and one of the largest employers around the world, has had to close their restaurant lately, not because of COVID, but because they haven't been able to find and retain enough employees to operate both the drive-through and the inside. The issue of employment within our service sector, within our various industries across the community, is paramount. And that was one of the driving forces behind making this change in the first place. So I hope that following the 26th, I hope that we, as a county council, will have positive news, or news that we can convey to the majority of constituents, that we've understood and we've heard the concerns, and that we're looking to make changes that are reflective of our constituents' needs, and that we'll be able to move forward so that a year from now, when the new council is sworn in, they're not having to talk about waste management, because we will have had a system that's operating efficiently and effectively, and that the vast majority of people will have embraced. And I'd be happy to field any questions.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Council, any questions? Councillor Doherty and then Councillor Coleman.
Thank you. And just a quick question through you to the Deputy Mayor. I may not have been listening closely enough, but that workshop on October 26th, is that open to the public, or is that just for County Council and staff?
Deputy Mayor?
My understanding is that it is open to the public in the sense that it'll be streamed through the YouTube channel of the county, but I'd certainly be happy to absolutely confirm that. And I can report back to you next week for sure.
Great, thank you. I certainly will be interested in attending myself just as a member of the AMO Waste Management Task Force.
Thank you. Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the Deputy Mayor. Quick question. I apologize if I've missed this in the communication. What is the county's plan for everybody's existing blue bins once the system changes over? Will those be collected like in a special pickup or?
So, and again, maybe you can pick up where I fall down if I do, Mayor Saunderson. My understanding is that they've taken a sort of a two-pronged approach. The first prong is, and in fact, I will give kudos to Jessica Owens of the local press, because she has reported on this, and that is that the preference would be that you'd keep the bins and that you would find alternative means to their use, in particular the recycling bins. The second is that if you deem that they're beyond use or can't be used for a different purpose, they certainly can be dropped off to the 10th concession facility that's operated by the County of Simcoe. I can ask the question and find out, but I do not believe, and I stand to be corrected, I don't believe that they are going to be doing a special pickup for the carts. I say this sort of tongue in cheek. You can always shove them in the new bins and make that part of your first waste collection on November the 1st. But I'll get back to you specifically on that. But my understanding is it's two-pronged. One, the county, and you can find it on the county website. Here are some alternative uses that may be helpful. And as I say, Jessica Owen reported on that. Two is that the bins can be dropped off at the county facility. And just as they can be dropped off, and or if somebody for some reason needed one between now and the implementation of the first, they're still available for pickup there at that site.
Follow up, Councillor Coleman?
Please, I appreciate that answer very much, and I'll look to both those sources. I guess my question is, if you happen to know, because I don't, if they're recyclable, the old bins, ultimately, are we putting a bunch of, I'm leading into the idea, do we ultimately dispose of a great deal of hard plastic as we transition to these cart systems? And then I share the comment, if we end up changing to a smaller cart option, the same question looms, what becomes of all these giant pieces of molded plastic, as we transition again? Could we be looking at, a household disposing of 2 sets of potentially unrecyclable plastic? I don't know. I'm going to leave that with you as a comment, for consideration. Because, I've been asked by residents, so what are we going to do with these? And I agree with you. They certainly, can be handy around a household, but further to your motion's point, not everybody really has that amount of space. So I'm just curious where they ultimately end up. But I appreciate your comment. So I thank you for that.
I think to answer the second part, any waste bins that are being returned or exchanged for smaller bins or various sizes bins will be retained. Given our growth projections, they can certainly be utilized in the coming years, and the term of the current contract, I believe, is 10 years. So they will not be thrown out or recycled. They will certainly be reused. In terms of the existing blue boxes, I don't know the answer to that, but my understanding is the same as the Deputy Mayor's. And I guess another wrinkle on the recycling front is that 2 years from now, we will be switching to producer pays. So that will change the system potentially. Producers will be responsible for the payment of the pickup and recycling, whether they continue to, if they hire the county or opt into our contract or get their own pickers, waste management or recycling pickup will be an election for them. But in 2 years, it will be producer pays. And the hope is that they will cut back on packaging so that there will be less to stick in our blue boxes and recycling bins in the years to come. And Councillor Doherty, I know you're on the AMO board. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, you're absolutely right. The target is for 2023 to have full producer responsibility, but that is not all producers, not all materials. Right now, there is a little bit of back and forth between manufacturers and the province. But we hope that ultimately what will happen is not that we have more recycling, but that we have less packaging.
All right, Deputy Mayor, you have anything more for that answer?
No, well, the one comment I was going to make actually, and so I'll just pick up, and again, it relates to the size, and it's just, I've heard from a number of people, or I've read online from a number of people who are concerned that rather than promote reduction and conservation, what we've done, in fact, is sent a message to people that the bigger the better, and therefore you can produce more waste. And first of all, I think that that's just inherently wrong, that you're not literally going to, have a larger bin, so therefore you're going to produce more waste overnight. But the part of the rationale, whether it was dumb luck or if it was part of the rationale for going with the larger recycling bin in particular, is that we have seen an inherent increase in the delivery, the home delivery of goods and services. And it just, I was chatting, I think, with our mayor and our CAO in separate conversations, and I just happened to mention that the morning that they were delivered, I happened to be home, and as were a number of people, and we're out on the street, sort of, rolling these things up to our driveway, and my neighbors collectively just commented that the recycling isn't actually big enough. That as a culture, we've just, because of COVID, we've shifted to a culture of ordering online through various sources. And as a result of going to a store where you might get a package that is X, in terms of, size, now because it's coming through a delivery service, it's now, inherently bigger. And that has really posed a challenge. And you can see that. I mean, you can see going up and down the streets, the number of households that have not one or two blue bins, but 4 and 5, and the 4 and 5 are overflowing. And without identifying names, Amazon being one of them, you can clearly see where the packaging is coming from. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, again, for the majority, not to take away or diminish that there will be selected issues, because there are, but for the majority, this will serve well. And I think the size of the larger bin for the garbage, again, just because I have a larger bin at my house does not mean that I'm going to start to produce larger amounts of waste. But I do look forward to the fact that, 3 times out of the 52 weeks that the garbage is picked up, I'm just making up numbers, the 3 times a year that I may have excessive amounts because of one reason or another, I now have a self-contained unit that's protected, it's sealed, it's not going to cause these problems that were part of the route of going this direction. And we'll go from there. And then the last thing that I would comment on is that the bin sizes have been of a bit of a lightning rod issue. Acknowledge it. What I found, though, is that it's then started to cause conversation and dialogue about other issues that are, quite frankly, just false. And so issues have been raised about, the procurement process, where are these bins manufactured, where are they coming from, et cetera. And part of the conversation is lost about the fact that, well, we live in a global economy. And the fact that if we want to respect the fact that we've got manufacturers like, oh my goodness, the glass plant, my apologies, the
Ignore.
glass plant on Ignore, thank you, who are competing globally and producing world-class glass, then, it's give and take. And it's not a fair example. It's just an example that we do have producers in our community, whether it's Ignore, whether it's Canadian Mist, et cetera, who are producing on a global stage. And there are a number of others. McLean is another one. And I found that part of the conversation has become frustrating because we're losing sight of a legitimate concern, which was the bin size, which I think we're looking as a collective through the workshop to take a look at. We're looking at trying to address the issue in the downtown. But some of these other issues that are being brought up, I really hope that people will take a look at the information that's been provided online through the county, because you'll find sort of, here are the reasons, here are the facts, and here are the answers as it relates to why this decision was implemented in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other questions or comments, Council? Councillor Hanlon.
Just briefly, Mr. Mayor, just sorry if you can hear that noise. They're replacing our roof. They've been at it since 8 o'clock this morning. Anyway, just to follow up on Councillor Comey's point, just a thought for Deputy Mayor Hall, that if the answer is, as you suggested, that households will have to take their own bins to the county transfer stations, that perhaps there could be an option for those people who don't have vehicles or a vehicle that isn't large enough to get to the, with all those bins. And secondly, if there's I think 10,000 households in Collingwood alone, and maybe pushing 60,000 in the county, and maybe it would be more efficient and certainly better from a climate perspective if there was just one truck going around picking up all the bins, as opposed to in Collingwood 10,000 people driving to the transfer station. But anyway, I'll just leave that for a thought with your discussion with staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions or comments, then we'll move on to 14. Item 14, council business. 14.1, old or deferred business. Is there any old or deferred business tonight, Council? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. It's actually a question that has come out of the deputation from the NVCA tonight that I don't anticipate an answer tonight, but I'd appreciate asking both of either our representative or through to town staff. There was mention during the deputation as it relates to the number of ash trees that are in that particular area. And previous council had endorsed a program to the tune of $1 million to protect the emerald ash or the ash tree here in town. And I'm just wondering what efforts, if there were any efforts, or if there had been any coordinated effort in the past between the municipality and the NGCA to protect ash trees within that core, if in fact that's the dominant species. Because if it's not, that is, it's unfortunate.
I'll look first to CAO Skinner. And maybe this is just something we take note of and come back next week, I think. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of heads there.
Yep. Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Deputy Mayor Hall, I would appreciate some time to look into that question as you suggest.
Thank you. Council, any other old or deferred business? That brings us to 14.2, other business. Any other business? Go ahead, Councillor Jeffrey, and then Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. So just going back to our NVCA deputation, I just want to congratulate the NVCA chair, our own Councillor McLeod, and the NVCA staff team on the open, transparent, and educational process that they've been willing to do, moving us through what the highest priority of that infrastructure is moving the water. And I appreciate that they're balancing the naturalization considerations, but knowing that the highest priority for that is moving the water and protecting the residents who live here from water damage and flooding. And then also I wanted to report to staff, this week is our Federation of Canadian Municipality meetings. It's the perfect storm, a federal election, federal advocacy, ending with FCM meetings. But I wanted to report on my responsibilities. Obviously, the Board of Directors, Committee of the Whole, the Election Readiness Committee, the FCM Governance Working Group, of which I am Vice Chair. The Chair is Councillor Rebecca Bly from the City of Vancouver, the Ontario Regional Caucus, the Rural Forum, the Standing Committee on Conference Planning, Standing Committee on Increasing Women's Participation in Municipal Government, Standing Committee on International Relations, and the Standing Committee on Municipal Finance and Intergovernmental Arrangements, the governance rep for the Jordan Municipal Support Program, which means liaising with the Canadian Embassy in Jordan, the Jordanian Embassy in Ottawa, Global Affairs Canada, and the FCM communities who are participating. I've been on a design team working on the design for the next international programs with Global Affairs Canada, and sitting on the FCM StatsCan Partnership Technical Working Group through the Rural Forum. So they're coming with some opportunities for our municipality to participate in some forward-thinking abilities in terms of the stats that we can get at that make really good use for our municipality. Anyway, so that's it for me under other business. Thank you.
Thank you for that update. You've been busy. Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you. I have a question through you, Mr. Mayor, for Executive Director Peg. And the question is if she could please provide a status update on the hiring of our climate change specialist. Thank you.
Executive Director.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Hamlin. I'll start by saying I certainly recognize the significance of this position in our community-based strategic plan, and specifically in the development of the Climate Action Plan. I'm pleased to share that we did receive a number of high-quality applications from a number of candidates with impressive professional experience and education and credentials. To date, we have completed interviews for the position and are moving into the next steps in that recruitment process. I'm optimistic that we will extend an offer in the next week or so, and hope to have this individual onboarded in the fall.
Thank you for that. Any follow-up, Councillor?
No, that's great. Thank you.
All right, Council. Any other business? That brings us to our confirmatory bylaw, which is item 16. And the resolution reads that bylaw number 2021-59, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the regular meeting of Council held September 20, 2021, be enacted and passed this 20th day of September 2021. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Madigan and Councillor Doherty. I will call the vote then. All in favor? That is passed unanimously. And that leaves us with one simple motion to go, and that's the motion to adjourn. Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. It's been a busy meeting. We still have time to get to the polls, so get out to vote if you haven't, and it will be an interesting night. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, everyone.